So our next speaker is Professor Claudio Orlandi. He came from our specialty for the winter school at Berlin, and he's going to present us some new directions in blockchain privacy.
Is this one? I thought you were going to lie and say that I came especially for this talk, which would essentially be a lie. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Omer for giving me the opportunity to speak here. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I would like to thank Omer for the invitation. I have the pleasure of knowing Omer from the work with Kaizen, and I really I think I know very few people that are as passionate and motivated as Omer, and I think all his work he's doing with organizing this meetup and the Facebook group and the community is trying to raise around these topics. For me, it's very inspiring. So thank Omer. So there are not going to be. So another one disclaimer is that I work in academia, so I know a lot about very few things. I expect most of you to know much more than me about most things. So please, interrupt me if I say something that you think makes no sense, and I would like to get feedback from you. So Bitcoin and anonymity. So as you all know, I mean, probably Bitcoin, the first time it hit the mainstream media was back in 2013 when it was associated with the Silk Road, this anonymous marketplace where people were buying illegal stuff using Bitcoin due to the alleged privacy anonymity property they would get by using Bitcoin. If you go on WikiLeaks, I don't know if it's today, but I mean, at least when I took this screenshot, you would see that it says that Bitcoin is a secure and anonymous digital currency. So WikiLeaks invites you to make donation via Bitcoin, and this was the address I saw there. Every time you go there, you get a new address, of course, because they understand things. But still, I think that there is this claim: is secure and anonymous digital currency. I like this website. It's called Shit Express. It's a service that allows you to buy poo for people you don't like. So among the services, there is that you can choose an animal. Today, or at least when I took the screenshot, they were offering horse poop. So if you're into that. And what's remarkable is that, of course, I mean, when you send a piece of shit to a person you don't like, then you typically don't want them to know who you are. So it says pay and stay anonymous, right? And it says pay with Bitcoin or PayPal. The service is 100% anonymous. We will never reveal your identity, even if you pay with PayPal, which I guess, I mean, assumes that if you don't pay with PayPal, but we pay with Bitcoin, then, your anonymity is guaranteed by the system you're using, right? So I hope that, as all of you know, all of these claims are wrong and they're complete lies, right? Bitcoin is, there is no privacy in Bitcoin. Ian Myers was, a serious cryptographer and serious cryptocurrency researcher, says Bitcoin is like Twitter for your bank account, because every time you do a transaction, this gets broadcasted to everyone and then is published on the blockchain for everyone to see forever. And you say, oh, but you only see the pseudonym, so you don't know who's doing what. But there are at this point old papers like A Fistful of Bitcoins by Sarah Michaeljohn and other people that have shown that as soon as you start making transaction with people, then that this address belongs to this company, and then you can, using some simple heuristics on the blockchain, you can essentially map a lot of the money on Bitcoin and assign labels to these clusters and know who has what. This is so simple that there was this ransomware attack a couple of years ago. It hit Denmark pretty bad, and even the journalists, right? I mean, I have nothing against these journalists, but I'm sure they didn't take any crypto class. But everyone can see when the hackers behind WannaCry they moved their money out of the addresses that they were using to collect the ransoms. Everyone could see it, right? Because it's on the blockchain, right? So I mean, you put this address in the ransomware that you send to everyone, then everyone knows your address, and then everyone knows where your money is, right? There are companies like Chainalysis that offer monitoring services on the blockchain for law enforcement agencies and others that are interested in finding out who has how much money and why. So it's clear that so there isn't so much privacy in Bitcoin, even though it's sometimes sold as such. So I've been, my background is cryptography, so I understand a little bit about encryption, privacy, and cryptographic mechanisms to do this. And I wanted to give a very high-level overview about some of the current research projects. If I have, please let me know how much time I have so that I can also choose maybe if we have less time because of the...
No, very good less time.
Okay. So I mean, the hope is to give like three, a quick introduction to the different projects. One is Quisquis, which is about anonymous transactions. Another one is about proof of stake and their interaction with privacy. And the last one is about balancing accountability and privacy in blockchain transaction, which is something I think will be more and more relevant in the future. Right, so yeah, I mean, the three parts of the talk are color-coded. So I mean, if you don't like one of them, you can close your eyes for 10 minutes. And when the color changes around the slides, then you know that we're in a new section. So the first section is Quisquis. So this is based on work with Prasudi Fauzi and Rebecca Mercer, with are working with me at Aarhus University, and Sarah Michael-John, who is at UCL in London. And you can find this on the ePrint report. Prasudi also gave a talk at the Stanford Blockchain Conference, which took place a couple of weeks ago. So there is a longer version of the talk online if if after the 5 minutes I give you here, you want to know more. So Quisquis lives at the transaction layer. So I mean, Bitcoin research or cryptocurrency research lives at very many different layers, network, consensus, identity, transactions, smart contract application. Now we're going to focus on transaction. How do we move money from Alice to Bob? I'm only going to present the very basic version of Quisquis, where we make the simplifying assumption that every key contains as a coin, one coin, which is of course not realistic, but then you will have to watch the other talk or read the paper to know how we do the rest. But in order to understand, to explain you why we designed Quisquis the way we did, I need to say something about other anonymous cryptocurrencies and what their limitations might be. In order to do that, I mean, Ariel already gave a good introduction to this, but I need some terminology. So here it's, here is the blockchain evolving over time. The beginning of time, there are only two people in the universe with money, 1 and 2, and they both have one public key with one coin. At some point, 2 sends his money to 3. So the state of the blockchain after one transaction is this. PK1 still has some money. PK2 disappears because it has no more money, and PK3 has some money now. Then PK1 sends some money to 4, so you can, the first 2 addresses don't have any money anymore. Then the third and fourth address have money. And I'm going to call the entire, all the public keys who ever had any money, I call them the blockchain, and the public keys who have some money right now, I call them the UTXO. This was already introduced before. And for context, I mean, the blockchain and the UTXO are very different in size, right? The blockchain, a few months ago was 180 gigabytes, and the UTXO was only 3 gigabytes. And why do you need the UTXO? You need UTXO because next time someone spends their money or try to spend their money, right? You have to, if I try to send some money to someone, when one here sends money to 4, and you receive this transaction, to know if this transaction is valid or not, you need to go in the UTXO and check whether PK1 was in the UTXO at that time, right? And when now PK3 wants to send some money afterwards, you need to check that they still are in the UTXO, they still have money. If PK1 tries to spend money again, you say, no, you're not in the UTXO, now you don't have any money, right? So luckily for us, there are alternatives to Bitcoin if you want to anonymous payments. There are things like Dash, Monero, Zcash. But again, I work in academia, so I prefer to talk about abstract crypto technologies than actual products because the first one it's easier to reason about. The second one is much more complicated. There are things that are when talking about the privacy which is provided by the cryptographic primitives, it's very easy to make clean claims and say, like this works like this or this works like that. If you then go and look at an actual product, there are a lot of other issues. For instance, how this is used, heuristics, ways in which people are doing things. I think there was a paper last year at Usenix by Sarah Michael-John and others who showed that there was some heuristics that some Zcash miners were using, which said something like, when you mine some blocks, you put the money into the shielded pool, but then you take them out at a specific time after you put them in, and then just by observing at the time in which the money comes in and out, right? Then you can, if you know that people are doing it exactly 51 seconds after they generated the transaction, right? Then you can de-anonymize those transactions. So by talking about the cryptographic technologies, I don't need to worry about this. So if you worry only about the cryptographic parts of auto-achieved privacy on blockchains, there are essentially three main technologies, right? One is Tumblers. The other one is ring signatures, and the final and most powerful is zero-knowledge and snarks. When you want to compare these technologies, I mean, you have to think about different things. One is need for coordination. Do the users need to talk to each other, or deniability? You know, to which extent can I pretend that I didn't do something that I did? Can we prove anonymity? In which sense? Do we need to rely on the trust of other parties? What are the consequences of achieving anonymity for efficiency, for instance, in the size of the UTXO? So let's look at Tumblers. Tumblers is the easiest, guess, way. It was the first, probably the first suggestion to get some privacy on Bitcoin. So the idea here is very simple. So A wants to give one coin to B, and C wants to give one coin to D. Instead of making two single transactions from A to B and from C to D, which you could see, A and C go together and say, let's make a two-to-two transaction, a transaction with two inputs and two outputs. So where, you know, we have two inputs to the transaction and we have two outputs to the transaction. My slides are online, so in case people are interested about that later. So we have two inputs now and two outputs. All my slides only have two, you know, inputs and outputs or whatever, because I didn't want to clutter them. Of course, two could be generalized to n, right? But let's say there are two inputs and two outputs. And when you make the transaction, right, the transaction then now looks like a box. So like it's a black box. So you only see that there are two inputs and two outputs. You don't know who sent money to whom. So if A wants to send money to B but doesn't want the world to know, then now A and C are together sending money to B and D. So now you're not sure whether A sent money to B or to D, which gives some level of anonymity, especially if you do this in a larger group, right? This, of course, can be generalized to end senders and end receivers. How do you do that? There are two ways of doing that. The first one is centralized tumblers, which are very easy. It means, you know, everyone gives their secret key to some trusted third party. And then the trusted third party makes this transaction for you, right? Because now we have to make a transaction where that I sign and you sign, right? So first of all, we need to agree, like, you know, A and C in this slide need to meet and you know, agree that now we do a transaction with two inputs and two outputs. They both need to generate the transaction. They need to sign it. There is some coordination, right? So this coordination can be taken care of course, in an easy way by a centralized party. But of course, that's really bad for anonymity because now this party knows who sent money to whom, and not for security, right? They can just take your secret key and run away with it and bye-bye your money. Decentralized tumblers are, of course, can be made secure using cryptographic protocols. Tumblebit is a very a good example of that. They're a bit harder to implement in practice because, again, how do I find other users that want to mix their coins with mine? And usually, you know, if you want to have a good cryptographic protocol that does that, this would require some interaction, so we need to be online at the same time and things like that. And of course, you know, if I'm posting on my Twitter account, hey, who wants to do a coin, a transaction with me? I'm revealing that I'm participating in one of these tumblers, which might in itself be a way of getting my funds blacklisted, right, by someone. A different technology is ring signatures. So, I mean, I assume everyone here knows signatures, right? You know, you have a public key, you have a secret key, you can sign a message. Yeah.
About the tumblers,
yeah.
Isn't that just the coin join?
Yeah. I mean, coin join is I mean, tumblers is, I guess, more generic word for coin join. Coin join is an implementation of a tumbler. I should have said that. Yeah, sure. Yes. So ring signatures are, I mean, everyone knows here what signatures are. Ring signatures are signatures in which, when you sign, there are a number of public keys, right? So normally when you sign, you sign with your secret key, for your public key. But when you do ring signatures, instead, you use your secret key, but you can add a number of public keys in the signing process. And the rules for ring signatures say that, as long as you have the secret key corresponding to any of these public keys, then the signature will verify, right? So now you again have an example with two public keys, PK0 and PK1. And now, regardless of whether I use secret key 0 or secret key 1, I can generate a signature on this message that anyone else will be able to verify under these two public keys. This means that when you see a signature S, so we want then some indistinguishability property, some privacy property that says that when you see a signature S, you shouldn't be able to tell whether this was produced using the secret key 0, the one corresponding to the first public key, or the secret key 1, the one corresponding to the second public key. Of course, in general, you can use m public keys to do that. So once you have this, you can do transactions using ring signatures, and this is a very abstract version of what Monero, for instance, does. So going back to our very simple word with 2 users, at the beginning of time, you see that they're going to see that there is a transaction between either PK1 or PK2 to PK3. And then afterwards, you see that there is a transaction from either PK1 or PK3 to PK4. And now after you observe these 2 transactions on the blockchain, because this transaction is still visible, right? I can ask you, was PK1 spent? And you cannot be sure, right? Because it could have been PK2 and PK3 who actually spent their money here. Could have been PK1 and PK3. Could have been PK2 and PK1. It could have been many different things. So after these 2 transactions, there is still some uncertainty on whether PK1 has spent their money or not, which is great from the anonymity point of view. But of course means that you're not able to remove PK1 from the UTXO. You need to keep remembering that PK1 might have some money because they might have some money. There are also some issues with the anonymity guaranteed by these kind of solutions. And this has to do with the fact that when you do a lot of these ring signatures, and depending on how you choose the set size and depending on what the set size are, right, you might be able to start doing something which is typically called intersection attacks. So let's see if I remember this example. So in this example, in the first transaction, either PK1 or PK2 send money to PK3. And then you have that either, in the second transaction, you have that either PK1 or PK2 send money to PK4. So this means that since we know that we cannot double spend your money, after these 2 transactions, you know as a fact that both PK1 and PK2 have spent their money, right? You don't know if it was first 1 and then 2, but you know that after these 2 transactions, you know that both of them have spent money. So now we have a third transaction from PK that, here PK3 wasn't very clever in his choice of partner in crime, right? And PK3 decides to make a ring signature choosing PK1 as the anonymity set. And because everyone else on the blockchain has observed that PK1 has already spent their money, now this transaction here doesn't give any anonymity guarantee to PK3.
Assuming that you only use once each public key.
Assuming that you only use once each public key, which has to, if you, in this simplified model where every public key has only 1 coin and can only be used once, right? And ignoring double spending, right? So there are some issues in the way this happens. The splendor of privacy technologies is zero knowledge. If you don't know anything about zero knowledge, there is a school running not very far from here. I will invite you. Those are these magic protocols that were being described before, that allow you to prove that something is true without revealing why this something is true. So using zero knowledge, or in particular using these advanced zero knowledge protocols like SNARKs, which you just heard about, you can essentially extend the ring signature approach to having input size of where the input size, instead of being 2 parties, it's anyone, right? Anyone in the universe. So now using zero knowledge proofs, essentially what you can do is that every time you do a transaction, instead of making a transaction that goes from 2 to 1, you make a transaction that goes from everyone to 1. So because every time the input set is everyone, this will just keep growing, and you will never be able to learn who spent their money and who didn't spend their money. So this was the ball. Well, no, not the ball. This was the box, right, with the numbers from before. So in my very abstract version, right now we have the PK1 and PK2. They make a transaction to PK3. And then in the next step, it would be, you would observe a transaction that goes from either PK1 or PK2 or PK3 to PK4, right? And if there was another transaction, it would be from any of these to the next one, and so on, right? So you will never be able to learn anything, which is amazing, right? I mean, the fact that we can do these things, it's magic. It's pure magic. There are some issues with this, right? One is that the generation time for transaction is quite high using snarks, and there is this need for this trusted setup and using non-standard crypto assumptions, which, as we have heard before, can be, I mean, the need for trusted setup might have impact in the way this is perceived, right? I mean, someone needs to produce these parameters, right? There's a question here, maybe. Nope. Okay. I love the sound of my voice, so I can keep talking forever. But so please stop me, and if there is something yeah.
I have a question. It's a tangent from
Sure.
the cryptography aspect, but it's more of a question. Most of these anonymous cryptocurrencies rely on the fact that there is no one doing traffic analysis. So regardless of the cryptography that you use, I wonder if we can just track the time someone is online on a particular website sending a transaction.
Right.
We've been doing this with Tor. Can we not do this also for anonymous cryptocurrency?
Right. So we can. So you had the microphone, so everyone heard the question, and the answer is yes. Of course we can, and there are papers on that, right? So there are. As I mentioned before, I think there was this paper by Sarah Michael John and co-authors. Sorry for those that are watching from home and I'm not remembering your name, but there was this paper at Usenix last year showing that some heuristics could be used to de-anonymize some Zcash users. I'm pretty sure that there was also some paper doing the same thing for Monero. So understanding the anonymity achieved in practice by any of these systems, it's a very interesting research question, right? And it has to do, as you correctly point out, right? It has to do with the fact that, of course, I'm talking about the anonymity provided by the cryptography, but you could observe where the message is coming from, the IP address, right? I mean, you can observe when this transaction is taking place. What time have I received this? Can I correlate this with, I see you, I see you paying for a kebab, and then I see a transaction. Coming on the blockchain, so maybe that was you, right? So of course, all of these things are outside of the cryptography, and they're very relevant, right? And I think that they, so I mean, yeah, using strong cryptography, it's a necessary tool to get there. It's definitely not sufficient. It's not sufficient for getting the anonymity of the privacy that you might want, right? That's a very good point to remember. It's also why I started saying, I'm only going to talk about crypto because that's what I understand, right? Don't like to talk about things I don't understand. Yes?
No, just saying we should speed up for...
Sure. Especially because I said I had 3 talks, right? And I mean, half of the first one. So what I'm going to jump number 2 and I'm going to go to 3. So I want to tell you the basic idea of this, of our design, this Quisquis, which essentially is doing tumbling or doing coin join, but without talking to the other people who are doing tumbling with you. So the basic idea of a Quisquis transaction will be to do a transaction from n parties to n parties without any interaction. So we have here S, the real sender that wants to send some money to R, who is the real receiver. And to do that, S is gonna, because S wants to get some anonymity, is also gonna add a transaction that goes from A to B. So now, because there are 2 transactions, you don't know who sent money to whom. This gives some anonymity. You can also, of course, add. You can do it, of course, with n inputs and n outputs. And of course, here there is a problem, right? I mean, so the sender wants to send some money to the receiver, but Alice, you're Alice. You never wanted to send some money to Bob. So I mean, why should I be able to move your money without your consent, right? That sounds weird. So I mean, if I can move your money, then I can also steal your money, right? So how can we do this? This doesn't sound right. So here is an idea that doesn't work, which is now the sender wants to send some money to the receiver, and to hide this transaction, we add a transaction from A to A. That's good because I'm not stealing A's money. I'm sending A's money to A, right? I'm making a transaction that goes from A address to A address, so I'm not stealing your money. Of course, this doesn't help with privacy, right? Everyone on board with this? So the idea, what if I could move A's money to a new random looking address, which also provably belongs to A. So essentially, I'm moving money from your bank account to another bank account, which I can prove belongs to you. Then it's fine. I mean, maybe, I can move your money between your bank accounts as long as they are all yours. You probably don't care too much.
But on only you and me see that it's mine.
Only you and me see that it's yours. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have to prove to everyone, right? I mean, I'm gonna have to prove to everyone that I send your money. They send your money to you, or you know that I didn't move any money which wasn't mine. Let's put it. I have to prove publicly that I didn't move any money which wasn't mine, so that I moved my money, and all the other money just changed name. The account number changed, but the owner didn't change, right? And you will know that your account number changed. Okay, so how do we do this? The idea to do this is to use what we call updatable public keys, which is, this is the only slide with math I have. So you know, it's like a public key system. You have a public key and a secret key, but you also have some update function that takes a public key and produces some public key prime. And the property we want is that the new public key is still functional with the same secret key, right? So the new secret key is still a good secret key. The old secret key is a good secret key for the new public key. So correctness, this is a valid key pair. Indistinguishability, PK prime looks like a completely fresh address. No one knows who it belongs to. And the way we can implement this is, you know, this is the only slide with math, is the following. So X, the secret key is going to be like, you know, like a Bitcoin secret key, like some exponent, the secret exponent of some point, right? But instead of having a fixed generator, instead of having a fixed point for everyone, so every address has their own a random generator. So your public key is composed of two elements. The first is G to the S, some base element. And then the second one is G to the S raised to the X, where X is the secret key. To update, I can simply take both of the elements in a public key and raise them to the same exponent. So now the discrete log relation between the two did not change. If I write up what V is going to be now G to the S to the R to the X, and U is, this one is G to the S to the R, right? So the discrete log relation didn't change. So the secret key didn't change, so everyone is happy. So yeah, so that's what a basic Quisquis transaction is. You know, I have a real input, I have a real sender S who wants to send some money to R. And you know, I can, you know, I know one of your public keys. I can just create a new public key for you that I put there, and to send your money there. And then I can take someone else from the audience, right, and just decide that I'm going to move their money as well. So I take their money, and I can move them to some other address, which is obtained by updating this first address. An external observer sees just two random unlinkable addresses. There is nothing here that links them to the first one. And of course, to make sure that I'm not stealing money from other people, I need to do a zero knowledge proofs that I did everything correctly, which means that, you know, all these keys were updated correctly, and I knew the secret key of one of these, and therefore I can spend it. So note here that now this is like in Bitcoin, or like in a Tumblr. So now these addresses have been completely spent, and now these addresses have some money. So I can remove these addresses from the UTXO. I only need to remember those. So the UTXO doesn't grow. You cannot steal other people's money because you know, if you have your secret key, you can move the money. If everyone else's money didn't change the owner. I mean, the address changed, but the owner didn't change, so that's fine. And anonymity follows from the fact that the updated keys look random, and the zero knowledge proof will hide which address goes where, right? Yep.
If you ever have signatures, can you de-anonymize by just checking whether the public keys can decode signatures across, you know, paths?
Right, good point. So there are no signatures here, right? So I'm not signing these. I'm doing a zero knowledge proof, right? So in fact, I'm never using the secret key to sign anything. I'm doing a zero knowledge proof that I have the secret key corresponding to one of these keys.
For example, in like Ethereum, if I was using MetaMask, sometimes a website would prompt me to sign a message.
Right.
Is there anything that would like that in the Bitcoin ecosystem where people are requiring you to sign messages to attest it?
Right. So I mean, I don't expect that this will be compatible if you plug it into anything. Also, in cryptography, usually, I mean, if I prove that this is secure, when I use the secret key here, if I start using the same secret key for some other purpose, with 99.9% probability, the combination is going to be insecure, right? So reusing a secret key for two different purposes will probably break the system. So if I use the secret key for this Quisquis address to do anything else than what it was meant to be, I'm 99.9% sure that everything will break down. Yeah.
would there be any problem if there are two transactions and they reference the same
Yes, yes,
decoy public key?
right.
Then there's a block, and when these two transactions go into the same block, then by the time the first transaction is verified, then the second transaction would be invalid because by the time the decoy transaction's public key would have been changed.
Correct.
How do you
Correct.
prevent it?
So in the moment where this transaction is published, right, the address A has spent their money, right? So if someone else wants to spend that, they will have to wait until this transaction has been approved and then do the transaction later. If two transactions come at the same time, there could be a problem. How do we solve that? That's a good point. That's a good question. Yeah.
How does A learn about the new public key of himself?
Right. So A, in a similar way as you would do I mean, right now, like you would have to monitor the blockchain to see that your key was. I mean, if you see a transaction in which your public key was used as input, then you would have to figure out. You will have to update locally your address, which is similar to like updating your balance by observing the blockchain.
So, and in this case, your secrecy relies on the fact that A doesn't tell anyone that you moved their own money.
Right. So you're asking whether A could prove that they didn't do this transaction.
Yeah, they just know who did the transaction.
So not if it was an n. So in this case with 2 and 2, right? Then you can, right? If you have like n inputs and n outputs, then I trust that I trust that the adversary doesn't control all n-1 parties which I chose in my anonymity set. Right. But I could also say I didn't do it, right? I mean, so the question is whether there is like I can give a cryptographic proof that I didn't do it, which is a thread model which didn't consider but it's a very good point. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess there's a floating or maybe spamming effect that can happen here as well.
Yeah. What do you mean by spamming?
So I guess people could be instigating these transactions when they're not really spending money. So there's
right.
Stop people spamming the system in that way.
Right. So I mean, of course, this is the abstract level, right? I mean, if you were to implement this or build a system based on this, which we haven't, and to the best of my knowledge, none of my co-authors is currently doing, then you would have a system with transaction fees and the usual things, right? So that I mean, in the paper, yeah. So in the paper we also talk about how to deal with transaction fees, mining of blocks, and all of these kind of things. Yes. Last question about this, and then I'll say a few words about the.
So there might be like some kind of race condition. Like let's say, like one party makes spends some money and then.
Yes. So the question was.
Gets updated to B.
Yeah, was asked before, right? What if A wants to spend their money right after someone else has chosen A to be in the
I misunderstood then the other
right.
question. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I mean the point. Yeah, I mean if someone spends your money, you have to wait until that transaction has been accepted. Right. So no, I'll switch to the other. We'll take it offline. Sorry. The organizer is pushing me. It's their fault. So I'm gonna jump the proof of stake, and instead I want to say a few words because I think this is I mean the private proof of stake is very technical, and we'll be very happy to talk to anyone who's interested in that afterwards. I want to say a few words about this idea of balancing privacy and accountability in blockchain transactions, which is some work we are doing in house with Ivan Damgard and Chai Ganesh and Jesper Budzinski, and as part of this newly established Concordium Blockchain Research Center. And here I'm going to talk very briefly about the identity layer of this of the blockchain research space. So the motivation for this research is that I mean I started saying that Bitcoin is not anonymous, yet a lot of ill-intentional people have like the WannaCry hackers, right, have used Bitcoins in recent years. Either the ledge or the real anonymity provided by cryptocurrencies has attracted activities which I think most people would consider incompatible with social good, criminal activities, tax evasion, money laundering. Right now in Scandinavia, there is a big story about this Norwegian woman who's been kidnapped, and the kidnappers ask for a ransom to be paid in Monero, which is and this has brought Monero to be something that people talk about in the media, at least in Scandinavia. And on the other hand, I mean, there has also been some kind of resistance from large institutions, public institutions, financial institutions, or more in general traditional big businesses from entering the cryptocurrency world because of a lack of accountability and compliance with current regulations. And of course, I mean, part of this is by design. I mean, Satoshi Nakamoto's vision, right, it's a completely decentralized world, right, and I think many in the cryptocurrency space see this as an opportunity to replace all the institutions with completely new ways of thinking about money and thinking about value. So all of this is legitimate, but there are also issues with this. So here we're focusing on trying to understand whether we can design a system that satisfies both privacy in the sense that, unlike Bitcoin, I want to be able to hide my transaction history from you. I mean, I don't want you to know what I'm buying and when I'm buying it. I don't want my employee to know which addresses they pay to and therefore be able to check exactly when I spend my money and when and what I buy with my salary. My employee should not know. I mean, if my employee was paying my salary in Bitcoin, they would know exactly when and how I spend my money, right? That would be horrible. Even though it's a university, right? I mean, I think it's probably one of the best employees I could get, but in terms of I guess human rights, but I still don't want them to pry into my private life. At the same time, can we have a system which does that, but at the same time also achieve some level of accountability, something where illegal activities can be detected and prevented? So I mean, we're designing this infrastructure in which I want to sketch at a very high level. I mean, in this infrastructure, we have essentially at this very abstract level, we're going to have three high-level entities, right? We're going to have account holders, people like you and me that want to perform transactions on the blockchain, and we want privacy. There's going to be identity providers, which are services that authorize that you are who you say you are. You can imagine these as being, a local government or someone else who's, I mean, the people that are issuing your passport can also issue for you some kind of credentials that you can use digitally. And some entities, some anonymity revokers, as we call them, such that if a large enough threshold of these people or of these entities agree, they can go and open some transaction history. They can go and look at what's happening. And the goal of this is, of course, to ensure accountability. So the way a system like this would work, or we're imagining it working, is that in a registration phase, you, an account holder, will go to an identity provider, prove their identity by showing their passport, proving that they satisfy a list of attributes. I'm over 18. I have a tax number in Denmark or whatever, right? Bring my secret key and get a certificate. I could then later on go and use this certificate and put it on the blockchain, but not in plain text. I can encrypt my certificate in a similar way to what you heard before. Like imagine like in Zcash, I can commit to my certificate, put it on the blockchain. Everyone will be able to see who issued this certificate, but they will not be able to see who I am. Neither the identity provider should be able to see which account belongs to me, even though they issued this certificate. And then this should allow me to prove in zero knowledge on the blockchain things like, it says I'm more than 8 years old, I'm a registered company in Denmark, and therefore I'm allowed to do this kind of transactions. So we want privacy in the sense that no one, including the identity provider, should be able to see, to observe, to deduce the identity of the anonymity of the account holder from this information. We want to be able to allow transaction between users in a way that everything is encrypted. Transactions, values, balances, everything is encrypted. And where you can, in addition to that, prove statements about this transaction. For instance, this is a wine shop, and they're only going to accept payments from people that can prove that they're over 18, right? At the same time, if there is some reasonable suspicion about some account or some transaction, a number of anonymity revoker, imagine some law enforcement agencies, right? A threshold of them can go together and open up the identity of the user. And the goal of this is to try to come up with, I believe, the first design of an identity mechanism which satisfies things like know your customer, which bank or other financial institution need to have, which users are identified on the network and where you can prove statement about these transactions. Of course, combining this with features like privacy is a non-trivial task, which is part of the research we are doing. And the hope of this is that this should provide an environment that might be acceptable to entities like regulators, public institutions, financial institutions, to join and benefit from what's happening with blockchains and cryptocurrencies. Yeah. So if you want the talk number 2, I'll be happy to give it to you privately, outside. I would rather take questions. Yes.
Hi, thanks. So regarding the identities, so you're suggesting to have like public keys that each of them corresponds to an actual person, right?
Right. We're talking about the last part, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So each of the public keys corresponds to an actual person,
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have next, and this list is public, right? Of the public keys, the list is public, I assume.
Right. So I mean, so these objects, right? I mean, these account objects will be public on the blockchain, right? Yeah. And they will. I mean, imagine them as being like these zero cash coins, which like their commitment, right? Their encryption of your identity, which is sitting on the blockchain, right?
Yeah. So is there like some privacy issues? Like I imagine there would be like if someone manages to find some personally identifiable information and attach that to this public key,
right?
This is an issue, no?
Right. So there will be no person identifiable. So the question of what is person identifiable information in a legal sense is a very complicated one. I will leave it to someone else. But there would be, I mean, so on the blockchain here, would have a commitment or an encryption to your public key, right? The link between your public key and your identity will sit with identity provider, right? So I mean, I go to identity provider, I prove that I'm Claudio, and here's my public key, and then they will sign my public key for me. They will also sign a number of attributes I have. I'm over 18, I live in Denmark, I have this and that, right? I can now take these things that I got from the identity provider, commit them or encrypt them. If you never heard the word commitment before, just encrypt them and put them on the blockchain in an encrypted version. And now using these zero knowledge magics, right? Next time I do a transaction, I can prove that the person doing a transaction, for instance, is above 18 without having to reveal that it's me, right? I can just prove that, this account, it belongs to a person which is over 18. You don't know which person, just a person which is over 18. So this is the magic of it. So these similar concepts, I mean, these concepts in cryptography are known as anonymous credentials, right? So you can get a credential from someone that you can use to prove certain properties, some certain attributes about your identity without leaking any other information about, what you wanted to reveal.
But the private key never changes.
So I mean, I had like 5 minutes to present that, right? So yeah.
So you talked about the anonymous credential,
Mm-hmm.
but anonymous credential by definition doesn't allow the identity provider to reveal who actually signed it. It just say that I have someone that has been authorized in the first place is authorized. You cannot revoke it in an anonymous credential basic system.
Right.
My question that is coming from the predicate is how do you handle revocation? And what happened in case of revocation for the asset? And all around.
So try again. So what?
So the opening is something I understand. The question is revocation. Do you handle revocation, and how do you handle the revocation part in the system?
Right. So these dots here, right, will also include some information, some encryption of the identity, a threshold encryption of the identity using the secret key of the anonymity revokers, right? So a threshold of anonymity revokers. So imagine this, I encrypt this under all their public keys in such a way that if all of them decide to go together, right, they can open this account, right, and then learn about the identity behind this account and, for instance, block this account, right?
You didn't get very technical, but it just sounds to me like it's possible to link all the transactions that a certain person is doing. So you might not be able to know who the person is, but be able to know that like all of these transactions belong to the same person?
Right. So I didn't have much time to talk about the transaction. I mean I did. So there is a balance there, right? So I mean so the way we imagine this is that once you get this certificate from the identity provider, you can create many different accounts on the blockchain, right? So if you're very paranoid, you can create an account that you only use once. And then, I mean, this will be unlinkable to all of your accounts. If you have an account which you're not very paranoid about, for instance, you create an account from which you buy wine, and then someone will be able to see that this account is buying wine every Friday, right? Or Thursday if you live in Israel.
And when the identity is revoked, then the link is revealed between all the transactions?
Right. So yeah. So in a revoking setting, I mean, depending, this of course, I mean, exactly how the system would work, then, and which property would have to have for it to be compliant with current regulation would have to, we need to get some help from lawyers, right? And people are working on this. Yeah.
So just to go after this, it doesn't have to be publicly linkable. It can
right.
Just local.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There is nothing that prevents it. There's nothing that says that everyone has to see it, right? I mean, law enforcement could look at it and say, "Oh, you didn't do anything illegal. We don't need to revoke your anonymity," right? I mean, in a similar way as they would do if they look at your bank account and they decided you didn't, do cocaine drugs or something. Yeah.
So you seem to have a contradiction between two regulations. You have KYC, AML on one hand, and you have GDPR on the other hand.
Right.
And currently, I don't see them both being adhered to. So any thoughts on whether that can be even solved, because it seems to be contradicting at the source?
Right. So something I like to say is that so cryptography, I mean, some people should access some information, some people should not access that information. Cryptography is the necessary tool to enforce the boundary, right? So if you want, I mean, some information should be visible to some and non-visible to others. You need cryptography to set this boundary and to enforce this boundary, regardless of where you put this boundary, right? So your question is more about where you put the boundary, right? So what kind of information should be visible and what shouldn't be visible to both satisfy both these legal requirements? I think that this is a very complex question that some lawyers are trying to figure out, and I'm sure they will.
It goes deeper than that, because the regulation states about how the data that may be linked to private information needs to be managed by whom. So
right.
Sort of by saying it's on the blockchain.
Right.
We're trying to avoid that, but at the end of the day, there is someone that holds the blockchain and multiple copies of that.
Right.
And then they will have all the GDPR regulation forced upon them.
Right. I mean, we talk. Yeah. There are some very smart lawyers thinking about that, and I hope that they will come up with good answers to the question.
To reply on this, it's a subject I know quite well. In the GDPR depend on who submit the data. So if the user submit a proof of this data, is on his own behalf, he's handling everything, and doesn't fall into the GDPR condition. Otherwise, the GDPR prevent any transaction on any blockchain. The question is, who's send the proof, and what does it reveal?
But in this case, you have someone external that can unlock the identity.
Yes, but okay. So also on GDPR, there is legitimate reason for business to hold the data. And KYC and compliance is a legitimate reason to hold the data.
But that means that the data itself needs to be treated as private data.
The data, yeah.
Yes.
The blockchain.
Yes. I think we can discuss that for days and weeks and months, right? So.
It's the last one.
Yeah. Thanks.
Regarding revocation, what my understanding is that if you have an identity that you know and you want to know what transactions that identity did, you can revoke that the privacy of that user, and then you see which transactions they did. But does it also work the other way around? Or can it work the other way around? So if I see a transaction that I know that it's not legitimate, can I know somehow revoke the privacy in reverse?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah. I mean, we are writing a paper in a month or two. Will be on ePrint, and then I think all your answers will be. Thanks.